In the last video, I proposed that the Samaritan Woman story in John chapter 4 is structured as a chiasmus, a literary pattern with mirrored or inverted parallels that ring a central focus. I began this exploration by asking what the outermost shell of the story might be. I was fairly certain that A was verses 1 through 3, but I debated whether the A prime was verses 40 through 42 or verses 43 through 45. Verses 1 through 3 are thematically aligned with verses 40 through 42. In verses 1 through 3, Jesus learned, the Pharisees heard, and Jesus left. In verses 40 through 42, the Samaritan woman learned from Jesus, the Samaritans heard from the Samaritan woman, and Jesus stayed 2 days. This mirrored learn, hear, act pattern suggests intentional framing, but structurally, verses 1 through 3 align better with verses 43 through 45. Verses 1 and 3 and verses 43 and 45 read seamlessly if you skip the interrupting verses. Verse 2 interrupts the flow of verses 1 through 3, and verse 44 interrupts the flow of verses 43 through 45. I think these flow-breaking verses are designed to catch the reader's attention and signal key ideas embedded within them. While exploring the outer shell, I noticed something striking. Verses 1, 2, 3, 43, and 45 work together as a cohesive unit. It's almost as if the Samaritan woman story can be lifted out of the narrative entirely. This led me to ask, was the Samaritan woman story originally a part of John? I won't explore that question here. I want to stay focused on the chiastic structure, but I do plan on investigating that notion in future videos. Given further study, I now see the outer shell of the Samaritan woman story as simpler. A is verse 4. Now he had to go through Samaria. A prime is verse 43. After the 2 days, he left for Galilee. Verse 4 shows Jesus going to Samaria. Verse 43 shows him leaving that region. The entire Samaritan encounter is encapsulated within that frame. Within this outer shell, I found nested chiasms, smaller, mirrored structures within the story that support potential central themes. So far, I've identified 3 nested chiasms, plus the central chiasm that might hold the story's true focal point. In this video, let's examine the first nested chiasm. This section sets the stage by introducing all the key players, places, and social tensions. We have Jesus, the Samaritan woman, his disciples, Jews and Samaritans, geography and time, motivations, and cultural barriers. Quick map structure of the first nested chiasm. For A, we have verse 5, the arrival and setting. For the B, we have verse 6, the exact place and time. C, the central focus, is verse 7, the direct encounter and request. B prime is verse 8, disciples absent, Jesus alone. A prime is verse 9, Samaritan woman names the social barrier. Verse 5, so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. This verse sets the geographic and cultural context. Jesus isn't just in Samaria generally, he's in Sychar, on Jacob's land. This ties the meeting to Israelite heritage and subtly shows the shared ties between the two peoples. Verse 6, Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. We zoom in to the exact spot, Jacob's well. The detail about noon matters. It's an unusual time to draw water, suggesting privacy. Notice the phrase, tired as he was from the journey. It might hint at rest, evoking the idea of a Sabbath rest. While I can't prove it was the Sabbath, I find this detail suggestive given how much Jesus' ministry often highlights Sabbath acts. Also worth noting, if you remove tired as he was from the journey, you get Jacob's well was there, and Jesus sat down by the well. This cleaner reading makes me suspect the phrase is an intentional interruption, inviting us to think more deeply. Verse 7, when a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? Here, the two main characters meet. We see both motivations. The woman comes to draw water. Jesus asks her for water. This is the dramatic center of this nested chiasm. Verse 8, his disciples had gone into town to buy food. This brief parenthetical clarifies that Jesus, without a doubt, is alone with the woman. It's dramatic and strategic. If verse 4 previously had read, he and his disciples had to go through Samaria, this parenthetical note in verse 8 would not have as much impact. It also highlights the social tension, a Jewish man alone with a Samaritan woman. Verse 9. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." This is the bookend to verse 5. She immediately names the social barrier he has crossed, confirming all the cultural tension introduced in verse 5 by the narrator. In verse 5, the narrator sets up the cultural commonalities. In verse 9, the Samaritan woman voices the cultural divide. In verse 6, Jesus arrives, rests at the well. Verse 8 confirms he is all alone. All the tension builds to this question, a request that violates cultural expectations and triggers the dialogue to come. The outer layer of the Samaritan woman story is made up of verse 4 and verse 43. The first nested chiasm is in verses 5 through 9 and carefully sets the stage. The place, time, characters, and social tension are laid out in mirrored layers. At its center is the bold question, will you give me a drink? I encourage you to read these verses for yourself. See if you notice these patterns or find new ones. In the next video, I'll examine the second nested chiasm as we continue to ask the question, what is the Samaritan woman story?